Hi, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live series on the release of the ISM Report on Business. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm Senior Writer and Copy Editor for Inside Supply Management. That's Institute for Supply Management's member publication. Happy to be having you join us today. Hope you had a wonderful holiday season and are excited to have you here. Happy New Year to you, and we hope we have a happy broadcast free of the technical gremlins that plagued us last time. In December, the manufacturing PMI inched a little bit closer to expansion at 49.3%. That was its second highest reading of the year, and 3 of the 5 key sub-indexes were in expansion. Those were new orders, production, and supplier deliveries. And the PMI improved, which I thought was interesting, and I'll be sure to ask Tim about it a little bit later, without much support from the 6 largest manufacturing industries. None of them registered growth for the month. So 2024 ended with an interesting month, and so let's welcome Timothy R. Fiore. He's the chair of the ISM Manufacturing Business Survey Committee to break it all down. Tim, Happy New Year, and we'll start it by looking back, I guess. Just what stood out to you as you look back on the December data.
Yeah, Happy New Year to everybody too. So, good close to the year for sure. We've been looking for demand to come back now for a couple of years, and in November, we indicated that we might have demand starting to come back, and December just reconfirmed that. So it's not super strong. So we're probably not entering into a super strong growth period here, but there's clearly signs that demand is coming back. At the same time, output was stable to November with employment coming down again, which to me says that people were kind of late in releasing people. They probably wanted to release them in October, November. They ended up doing it in December. And that's okay too, as long as we're not continuing to release people in January, February, which would mean that they were really too late or something definitely has changed. Now on the input side, I'm still waiting for supplier deliveries to stiffen up, which would indicate that we have aggregated demand coming down to the supply base, which you expect to see in an expansion period. That hasn't really happened yet. So we're in the early parts here of demand and growth increases for 2025, but I think we're on the right path. I know with the listeners before I've said anywhere between January and March, we should see a PMI break 50. I think last month I indicated maybe February, latest March. I'm stronger on that February now. I think February, by the time we hit February's number, I think we'll break 50 for sure. So, and I think what's going to do that is really a stiffening up supplier delivery number, and we'll see the production number probably go back into expansion.
Yeah. Well, let's
drill down. The employment number stop contracting. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, let's drill down on those demand numbers a little bit. I know that's what we traditionally like to lead off with. Of course, it's been an issue for months now, and with the positive sign in December, new orders tied its highest reading of the year. The customer inventories went down to a too low number, and the backlog of orders even ticked up a little bit. So I know those are 3 of the key indexes that you look at to gauge demand there. Let's drill down on that and dive into those numbers a little bit.
Yeah, so we had seasonal factors that definitely helped us this month, as you would expect. I think there was only 17 or so work days in December compared to 21 or 22 back in October. Similar amount in November. So this is a month where we do have a lot of seasonals coming into play. Probably added a couple of points to the PMI because of that, which is fine. You would expect that anyway. I mean, if you don't have as many work days, how are you supposed to produce as much product as you did in the prior month? So I think the demand is an indication here. I don't know why it wouldn't continue to grow. Hopefully, getting closer to 54, 55. I think our forecast, as we talked about several weeks ago, is a little bit conservative. And I think as we enter into this new period, there's a lot going on here. Obviously the tariffs is probably the single biggest issue facing our supply managers, but it is a tactical issue. It's not a macro issue at present. We'll see what happens as time goes on. But I think demand's going to come back. We've been a couple of years here of burning off a backlog. I love the fact the backlog, although it's still contracting, it's contracting at higher than 45. We've been below 45 for a long time. So that means we're starting to rebuild order books. We need more new orders to come in. I don't think we're going to get much help from the export market. Germany and China are still very weak. German PMIs are in the 42 range. China PMIs have been 50, and they've been that way for at least 12 months, if not longer. So we're not going to get help from the international clients either. In fact, we may have headwinds with tariffs and counter tariffs and stuff. But and the customer inventory number ending the month of December is good because we're saying that our customers don't have enough of our product as we enter 2025, which is very positive. So I think demand is starting to come back. We'll see how it all ends up. I think the extension of the Tax Cut and Job Act, personal tax cuts is going to happen. I think that's going to happen in the end part of the year. I don't think it's really affecting the economy at this point. I think pretty much people believe that it's going to happen one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So we're off to a good start. The production, the output number I like too. We were stable to November at about a 50, and we're still destaffing, which, like I said earlier in the call here, I would have preferred that had been done in November and October, but nonetheless, it's happening in December. That's fine. This is a human process. You're impacting people's lives. It has to be well thought out. Once Trump won in November, there was a lot of clarity provided to the future, and companies had to make decisions whether they held people or let them go. Obviously, in this case, they decided to let them go because whatever's going to happen with Trump is probably going to be in Q2. So we're in a pretty good position, I think. Manufacturing inventory is staying at 48 and some change. As we close the year, usually you see that kind of contract from a cash flow standpoint, but it didn't. A couple of reasons there. People are probably trying to beat tariffs. You got that happening. You also have the Lunar New Year coming into place a little bit earlier this year. I think it's the end of January. So normally we see an increase in activity there too, although the import number is not up. But I think that's kind of the situation on inventory. I think the third element here is that people are much more willing to invest in inventory to get themselves closer to being on schedule with their customers. And they see less risk of holding inventory compared to what it looked like back in summer of last year. So I think the fact that they're willing to invest in more inventory as we close the financial year and it does impact their cash flow numbers is a positive sign that indicates that the manufacturing community is ready to grow in 2025, although I think the growth will be slow for the first half of the year.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, we are the Institute for Supply Management, and it's always fun to talk about the impact on supply chains. You alluded it to, I know, in earlier calls that you've done today in interviews. Supplier deliveries number, did it get or wasn't an expansion? And if that demand upswing is lasting, that of course is going to, challenge supply chains further. Just talk about that dynamic and how that could or should impact the index reading in the coming months.
Yeah, so the higher the number indicates that our suppliers are struggling with delivering to customer need. Forget about on time, it's the customer need. And the customer needs, when you don't have a lot of inventory, are usually a lot shorter than normal. So I think that's kind of where it's at. I think that we got a situation here where we're trying to get ourselves positioned to respond to the demand when it shows up. We're going to try to capture every sale that we can. That's not an unusual situation when your order book has been depleted and you have less of a universe of orders to fill, which means you better fill them because you got to maintain that revenue level. Without the revenue level, you don't have any income. I think our forecast indicated that our profit position in half two of 2024 was worse than half one of 2024, which means we're getting squeezed, which means we're not able to pass as much price increases through. We'll talk about the prices number later. That's a whole nother story. But I think we're showing in our forecast that next year, 2025, is going to be better than 2024. I think we've also said that the second half will be better than the first half. And our profit projection in the forecast indicated that the first half of 2025, from a profit standpoint, will be better than the last half of 2024. So the worst is probably behind us, according to the forecast. And given this PMI number, especially on the demand side, I feel that we've never been in the better. We haven't been in this kind of a positive position for the better part of a couple of years. And I think that this one is going to be more sustainable. We'll see what the Fed does. That's a whole pricing conversation we should have before the call is over. But we're starting out with an accommodative administration, regulatory change clearly coming. It's going to speed things up. Tax Cut and Jobs Act will get extended. That's going to maintain our current economic position, not make it worse. The headwind is really tariffs and geopolitical stuff, which you can't do much about the geopolitics, but we'll see what happens on the tariff side. But like I said, I don't think we've been in this strong of a position inside of a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. We'll talk about interest rates and tariffs and the impact on pricing. Yeah, that's definitely on our docket today. But I did want to ask you, it really didn't come up. I mean, obviously, it was mentioned in the report, hasn't come up much in the chatter that I've heard around today. But none of the six of the biggest industries, the manufacturing industries, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know the 5 and 6 tend to flip sometimes depending on GDP, but they are chemical products, computer and electronic products, transportation equipment, petroleum and coal products, food, beverage, and tobacco products, and machinery. None of those grew in December. Would you consider that a good sign overall, or a bad sign? I know we've talked about chemical products and how foundational of an industry that is for the other manufacturing industries. Just talk about that dynamic. I thought it was really interesting, especially in light of the positive PMI number.
Yeah, let's start out with only 50% of our industry contribution was contracting in December compared to 66% in November. But 49% were contracting at 45 or less compared to 48% or something the month before. So kind of everything that's contracting is contracting at 45 or less. Now, the difference here, there's a big difference between 45 and 42. And that's why you see the PMI number and the sub-indexes being as strong as they are, because we have had chemical products, although it's contracting at 45 or less, it's not contracting as extreme. Same thing with fabricated metal products. What hurt us this month was food and beverage finally fell into stable. It's been our top performing or number 2 performing for quite some time now. It registered about a 50 in the month of December. We expected it because it has a season, and the season ends at the end of November. So December is not a big work month for food and beverage, and you saw that we remained stable to the prior month. So that's a good thing. The one that bothers me the most is transportation equipment. It's being driven primarily by automotive, and what's impacting the automotive side is a huge increase in sticker price. I saw numbers $42,000 an average car price versus 33 or 34 several years ago. That's a big amount, and the financing amount is probably 2 to 2.5 times what it costs you to finance that car now compared to 3 or 4 years ago. So people are struggling with getting out of their old vehicles, which means that the vehicles are aging. Probably good for the repair shops and auto body shops and stuff like that, but not good for OEM. So our transportation equipment is still weak. Chemical products, our number 1 industry sector, is still under 45, but it's got a little bit better in the month, and hopefully we'll see that in February, March, break the 50 point. And our fabricated metal products, another feeding sector, it feeds a lot of automotive too, was weak again, but not as weak as the month of November. So yeah, the big 6 are not performing very well. But I think they're in computer and electronic products, was our number 4 industry sector, is at about 50. It was running 52, 53 the prior month. So we'll see what happens with that. A lot of that is a PC refresh cycle. Maybe some of it is AI generated too. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's kind of a weird month from an industry's contribution standpoint. We'll see what happens in January. I think we'll see chemical products climb back towards 50. May take a couple more months. Same thing with fabricated metal products. The machinery one is another interesting one. I think that's number 5. Big capital intensive industry sector. Think green goods, a whole bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. That's still contracting. We had a new order level 54 back in November, now at 46. But we don't seasonally adjust at the industry sector, so I'm not that surprised. Maybe more significantly, the production went from 44 to 39. So they probably furloughed people, ended the year early. It's been a really weak couple of years for machinery, capital intensive area. But I think we're in a pretty good position by the time we hit March, April, to see people start to invest in CapEx again. Our forecast indicated about a 5% growth in CapEx. So, I think we'll probably see kind of a wait on that in January, February, maybe. There's so many other things going on. But by the time we hit the end of Q1, I think we'll see our CapEx investments start to expand again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about prices.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about the prices number.
Yeah, the prices index 52.5% in December. That is a 2.2 point increase month over month. Just discuss that. I mean, there are a couple of dynamics that fit in that you alluded to previously, obviously what that might mean for interest rates. But let's start with tariffs, just from the standpoint that, as was pointed out earlier in a call that you did, they dominated panelist comments. I know that was a topic we talked about a lot in our call last month or in our broadcast last month. Just what were some of the concerns raised by some of the panelists, and any other insights or anything that may have changed over the last month?
Yeah, I don't think much has changed, Dan, with respect to the tariff situation and our prices number and our panelists' comments. Although the comments ended up to be somewhere around 38%, 35% of headline comments were around tariffs. Talk about what they're doing to avoid them, what they're doing, that they're concerned about them, and maybe even more importantly, people being concerned about counter tariffs and what that would do to the revenue line. So, huge unknown here. We'll see how it all plays out. Each case is going to be different. It's going to be transactional, one-on-one, us against one country and another, and here we go. So we'll see how all that kind of works itself out. But at this point, our prices number is really prices paid, so it's not prices we expect to pay. So we're still sitting here at almost a 53 price index number. The point I want to make is, for quite a long time now, if we're showing a slight growth in our prices, you're going to see that show up either as flat or slight growth in inflation in the PCE, the CPI, and the PPI. We're the first number to come out before those numbers come out, and the direction that we indicate is generally the direction that those have been following. And the numbers for November were flat. I mean, we're not taking inflation out anymore. And if with demand coming back, you could easily argue that that's inflationary. I mean, it's gonna, when you have need and somebody's willing to satisfy it, sometimes I'll satisfy your need, but at my price. And that's the environment that we're entering into here, even though we've got prices that are not where we want them to be, i.e. hard landing, get back to the basement. We never got back to the basement. So, the Fed's going to have trouble keeping inflation down and continuing to move towards their 2% target. I think they're 2.7 or 2.8% now. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a 50% reduction almost. If you 3 to 2, it's a 50% reduction in inflation. Not easy to do when you got demand coming back. So I think the Fed's going to struggle here with maintaining, moving toward a neutral stance. And I don't know that I would say that they're going to move accommodative, because at this point, I don't know that there's a need to be accommodative. So you saw that in the dot plot that came out in December. We're now forecasting 2 rate cuts in 25, probably quarter point each, compared to 4 or 5 when people thought we'd take at least a point off in 2025. Now they're thinking maybe half a point. So we'll see. I mean, I think the prices number is probably the most interesting here. And as we've talked about many times, this is the downside of a soft landing, is that you never got back to a floor. Same thing unemployment. We still have strong unemployment numbers, and now we're going to enter a demand cycle that's going to put more pressure on that. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see if we have the counter pressures. We have the fiscal policy now moving out ahead of the monetary policy, and monetary policy trying to maintain its objective of price stability at 2%. We'll see if 25 brings that 2% number up to 2.4 or 2.5. We'll see if the Fed decides that the normal inflation rate might be higher than what they've talked about for the last 15 years. And you got fiscal policy now that's accommodative. So it's going to be an interesting year to follow for sure.
Yeah. Just wanted to let our viewers know we have some more content on that. You may have seen in the chat that there's a webinar that ISM is going to present on January 9th, I believe it is. And regarding tariffs, got some SMEs that will have their thoughts on that you'll want to catch. And we'll also got 2 magazine articles for the January-February issue that are coming out in a couple of weeks. Tim and our other chair, Steve Miller, the chair of the Services Committee, had some great insights on an article on tariffs and also on the economic outlook and what it might mean for supply chains in 2025. So be on the lookout for that in Inside Supply Management in a couple of weeks. Talking about what might be coming on in the upcoming year, Tim. You made a good comment at the close of your conference call with reporters about the year in review, and you remarked that it should be an interesting 2025 with not only the way 2024 ended, but some of the dynamics, geopolitical, some of the fiscal policies that we've discussed that are going to be in play in the coming year. Just elaborate on that. As you talk about big picture, what should we be on the lookout for the manufacturing sector and the economy in general in 2025?
Well, so to start it off, the real question is this a profit focus year or is it a cash flow focus year? And I think it's a profit focused year. Now, the headwinds that we're going to face is the price pressure. And we, in our forecast, we're expecting a 3% price growth on our purchase material costs, which is about 50% higher than normal. Normally, 1.5 to 2% is expected, offset by productivity. We're saying 3%. Okay. And we also have a 3.2 or 3.4% growth in wages and benefit costs, which, all right. And on top of that, in our forecast, we asked whether companies are going to be able to pass these price increases, cost increases through. And, our performance on that has actually gotten worse by 50%. So a couple of years ago, 24, 25%, they couldn't pass price increases through. Now that number is more like 45% saying they can't pass price increases through, which means that if they want to ship product, they got to absorb that cost increase. And they're going to have to figure out how to do that with productivity gains. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a real challenge for the market, for the business community. And I don't see demand getting so high that it's going to change that dynamic in 2025. In other words, half of our respondents are saying, I can't pass price increases through because my customer can't afford it. My customer is not willing to pay for it. My customer has other choices. This is 2025. We'll see what happens in 2026. So there's going to be a real squeeze on profitability, which is going to drive a lot of aggressive action on the supply chain side. Supply managers are going to have to figure out how to keep that 3% growth down to 1.5 to 2, which may impact our order streams and our on-time delivery, because usually when these battles start, it's hard to get them resolved satisfactorily. Somebody has to ship. In the end, they ship at the new price, or they agree to take a lower price. And many times that takes some time. So the battle in 2025 is going to really be around profitability. It's definitely not a cash flow year. The last couple of years have been cash flow years. This is a profitability year. So there's going to be a lot of battles between buyers and sellers on what is the right price. And the momentum on that is going to be who has the upper hand. Is demand strong enough where you're going to have to agree anyway? Or is demand weak enough where your supplier is going to have to give in and give you what you want? I think that's the whole story here for the first 9 months of 2025. And we'll see what tariffs bring. I don't think we're going to see those probably until Q2. You may see them beforehand, but you may not see them go into place until Q2. And then we'll see how long they stay in place. I think a lot of this outside of China, I think a lot of this will be resolved by the second half of the year. And our forecast indicated that the second half of the year should be better than the first half of 2025, which fits well together. I think the tariff story outside of China will be pretty well resolved by the time we hit Q3. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Tim, I know it's one of those months where I wish we had more time, and I have some questions here that will go unasked. But I just wanted to end it certainly by giving you the opportunity. Is there anything that we haven't talked about, or anything that I haven't asked that you think would be important, to include before we end it here?
So let's close the year. I think we're closing the year on a pretty positive note. We've talked many times. We're 2 years into a manufacturing contraction. We've been struggling to burn off over ordering that occurred in the prior 2 years due to the pandemic. We worked hard at it. Backlogs have never been this low for this long. Demand was non-existent. It looks like we're finally starting to climb back out. And, outside of a rate reversal, I don't know why that would change in the first half of 2025. And I don't see a rate reversal happening in the first half of 2025. There is a potential for it in the second half of 2025. So I think it feels, looking back at this, since May of 2024, the panel has done a really good job in their companies of destaffing appropriately. We believe we took 1.1% of our headcount out in 2024, and it happened pretty quietly. I mean, you read about layoffs and things in the paper, but it wasn't large scale. So we were able to resize our headcount consistent with what we thought demand would be in 2025. Now, there's a lot of big caveats about what demand will finally be, but I think we're ending the year with our costs and our revenue lines pretty well aligned. So January should be a pretty good month. And I think the panel is ready to take on whatever comes at them. And it's going to be fiscally driven, not monetary policy driven. I think the fiscal policy here is front and center, and it will be for the next 9 months. And I think people are talking about a 2.5%, 3% GDP growth in 25. We'll see. I think tariffs could have a lot to say about that. I will say, in the last tariff cycle, which started in 2018, by the time we hit the summer of 2019, we thought that tariffs were definitely a headwind, and manufacturing went into contraction in August of 2019. And we believed at the time it was primarily driven by the headwinds caused by tariffs. So that's a point of interest for your listeners. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens this time around. They're not positive to the economic environment, but I understand, the need for them and why they're being used. We have never really used them outside of economic reasons. In this case, we're using them for holistic reasons, kind of like what China does. Where, as I mentioned on a call earlier, China is a centrally managed economy, and they have certain advantages of that. They pull different levers, i.e., stopping shipment of rare earths because of other issues. I think the Trump administration is willing to use a lot of other levers to get what they're looking for across the board, not just economic. We've never really done that. We started to do it in the last Trump administration. I think we're going to see more of that this time around, and I'm supportive of it. I mean, we have to solve this issue with China. Mm-hmm. It's going to take a long time. We either have to come to accommodations or not, and I think the next year and a half will bring that. So we ended the year really well. We struggled for the last couple of years finding demand. We have demand coming back now. There are solid signs that it is. The question now is, how strong will it be? I think it'll be fairly weak for the first quarter, maybe even the second quarter. And we'll see what the second half brings. Our panelists believe that Q2, half two will be stronger than half one. I feel that that's probably true. So it's a good end of a contraction period, good end of the calendar year. And here we go in 25. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Tim. That was great. And, I hope our viewers found a lot of useful and actionable information in that. I know I did. So thanks for joining us today. And for more information, feel free to go to ismworld.org, where in a little bit you can read our roundup article that details a lot of what Tim and I discussed here. And have a great weekend. And then join us on Tuesday, where we break down the Services PMI with Steve Miller. He's the chair of ISM Services Business Survey Committee. And if you'd like to be a part of the manufacturing, services, or hospital business survey panels that help compile data for the report on business, visit ismworld.org/join the panel for more information. So for Tim Fiore and some good people who helped us behind the scenes, Christina Cahill and Jennifer Stevens, my name's Dan Zeiger. We'll see you next time.